How much does God value your persecution and your trial that you're going through? I want you to listen to this insight from Ezekiel chapter 14 today, and I pray that through it you'll be really encouraged in what God's plans are for your life and how he sees you and how he loves you. Now in Ezekiel 14, God is telling the people of Israel through Ezekiel about the judgment that's coming upon the land. And he says this, which is really interesting. He says, even if Noah, Daniel and Job were in the land, they would not save the land. Despite their righteousness, they would not save the land. The land would still suffer this judgment, this downpour of destruction that's coming. And that's got me thinking. It's really interesting, that, because what was it about Noah, Daniel and Job that those three, it keeps saying that even if these three were in the place, I will still pour out my judgment. They would only save themselves. So what was it about these guys? Were they the most righteous people in the whole of the Old Testament? Is that what's been said there? Well, I don't think so. I think Moses would have been mentioned. I think Joshua could have been mentioned. I think Samuel could have been mentioned. So what is it about these three guys, Noah, Daniel and Job, that sets them apart, that makes God point these guys out as examples? And I think it's this. I think it's about the persecution that they encountered. And there's an order to it as well. He says Noah, Daniel, and then Job. That's not in chronological order. So there's an order to the severity of the persecution with which those three characters endured. And if you remember Noah, he suffered persecution from the people rebuking him for building this ark in the middle of nowhere any water, not knowing that the water was going to come down from the sky and from the fountains of the deep to cause his huge boat to float to safety. But he was criticised all the way through that, and he was having to live as a righteous man amongst such persecution and such pain and suffering in the world that was going on at that time. But God kept him, and God looked after him and his family, and they were safe on board that ark. And the second character that gets mentioned is Daniel. Now remember, Daniel was taken as a captive when Nebuchadnezzar came, when Babylon invaded the nation of Judah. And he was taken away, and he was forced to live in that foreign land, and there was persecution there, great persecution at certain times, because remember, at one particular occasion Daniel was thrown in a den of lions and faced with that catastrophe of being gobbled up alive by these ferocious beasts. But God saved him from that, sent his angels to stop the lions. And by the way, it wasn't the lions that weren't hungry that caused them not to eat Daniel, because the guys who made that horrible rule up that resulted in Daniel getting thrown in there in the first place, they were thrown in the very next day, and it says that the lions ate them before their bodies had even landed on the ground. So that was a great miracle. God protected him in another nation from the persecution of that nation. And then we come to our third character, Job. And I think he encountered the greatest persecution out of all three of them, because he had to endure his family being taken away from him, all these livestock being taken away from him, and his own health being taken away from him. And despite all that, he stayed faithful amidst that persecution. He stayed loyal to God. He stuck by him. Most people, having to endure what Job went through, would have just given up on God. But no, he continued to stay faithful to God and to talk about how one day he would see his Redeemer on the earth. Sure enough, one day Jesus came, the Redeemer, and set foot upon the earth. But even in that terrible situation that Job encountered, he was redeemed himself in an earthly sense. He was shown such grace and restoration as, again, 7 sons and 3 daughters were added to his family, and his health was restored, and all his possessions were restored doublefold what he had before. So God looked after him again ultimately and restored him before his accusers. And it wasn't just the physical suffering that Job had to endure. Job had to endure great suffering from his own people, and that's one of the hardest things to overcome. When your own friends turn on you, it's awful. You know, I remember Ron Dunn writing a book called Surviving Friendly Fire, and that's one of the hardest things to overcome. When the people who are close to you, the people you love the most, you expect to receive love from, when they turn around and then start stabbing your back, and that's what they're doing with Job. They're like, well, why has this happened? You must have done some kind of sin, Job. What did you do wrong? Confess it before God and everything will be fine. But as we know, it says that Job was one of the most righteous people in the whole of the world. So he wasn't suffering for righteousness' sake. He was suffering because God had a higher purpose, and God wanted to show to the world, to all his friends, to everybody in that region, that man will follow God for nothing, that he will still follow God faithfully despite everything been taken from him. And as a result, God won the bet, and Job remained righteous, and the day was saved. But you know, he had to endure great persecution from his friends, and that's the hardest thing to overcome. You know, Surviving Friendly Fire, in that book that Ron Dunn wrote, he talks about how, you know, in a war, you know, you can just about accept, as difficult as it is, you know, when loved ones in your family are shot down by the enemy, you know, because they've died for a higher purpose. But when you find out that your tank with your son in or whatever was bombed by friendly fire, it takes, as a mistake, it takes a lot more to get over that and to overcome it. And this is what Job was having to deal with, this friendly fire, the people who were closest to him criticising him. And you know, I don't know what you've gone through. I don't know whether you've gone through the similar kind of trials that Noah went through, or some kind of dangerous persecution that Daniel had to endure, or whether it's been that friendly fire and that pain of your health being taken from you, or your loved ones being taken from you, that Job encountered. But whatever it is, God has got a plan in it. God has got a purpose, and he's looking after you. And when you see in Ezekiel chapter 14 these characters extolled before the Lord as great characters, what set them apart from all the other characters of the Old Testament? It was the fact that they endured through persecution. So brothers, sisters, endure through persecution. Keep following him. He's got a purpose. We might not find out his full purposes and reasons for why these things happen down here on earth, but we will do one day. One day we will know in full. But just keep going to the end. Keep enduring, because those who endure to the end shall be saved. But I can tell you one of the purposes, and that's to gain a great victory for God against the world, against his enemies, against the devil, against all the demons, because they're all trying to castigate you and chastise you, and they want you to renege on your faith. They want you to turn your back on God in these difficult trials and temptations and persecutions and problems and suffering. But don't, because by doing so you will gain a great victory for God, and you will be rewarded. Maybe not in this earth, but he will give you everything you need, all the grace you need to get through it down here on this earth. But you will definitely be rewarded one day in heaven.